Right, so good evening, everybody. My name is Charlie, and I suppose I'm the final frontier to you being free for this evening. For those of you who don't know me, I'm aligned to our retail industry, and what that means is I spend the majority of my time pointed outwards into the marketplace, talking to the leadership teams of organizations like yourself. Fundamentally, my role is to understand the challenges, the innovations, the disruptions that are happening across the marketplace, and really think about how can we take those learnings home, and what does that mean for your businesses, and then how can we as BGSS help support you on the journey through transformation. So, I suppose by show of hands, if I asked the people in this room, how many of you keep a keen eye on the competition within your industry, probably almost all of you would put your hands up, right? If I asked how many of you look adjacent to your industries, perhaps in parallel industries at the competition for what they're doing, a lot of you would probably still keep your hand up, but not as many. And then the final question would be, how many of you travel internationally to look at businesses like yourself, to look at trends for similar types of customers, come home and think about how that then affects your business? Probably not very many, right? And so one of the things that we do at BGSS is we look outwards. So last year, as an example, Ralph and I did a white paper around the top retail experiences, innovations in New York City. How are they innovating through the use of technology, and what does that mean for the UK? And this year, 6 months ago, I was lucky enough to go to Japan for a number of weeks, and bringing these experiences back here for you today. And I think if we think about what we can learn and why we do this, there's a couple of things that we can learn by looking internationally. First of all, we get a look at the future. When we look at New York City as an example, we know the trends in retail find their way to the UK, usually 6 to 12 months after. And I think for us, it's about seeing the future, bringing that home, and thinking about, is that going to come to my industry? Is that going to come to my business? How do I prepare for that challenge? How do I prepare for that disruption? Or how do I play defense almost if I know the competition are likely to go that way in the near future? We get a look at innovation, so different environments, different rules, different ways of working, breaking out of what we know to think differently. And then finally, the cultural impact of different business models. Societies with different dynamics, what can we learn about them? How do they serve their demographics? How do they serve different age ranges? And what does that mean for us back here in the UK? So that brings us to Own Days. So Own Days, the CEO describes them, they are an optical retailer, if that was not obvious, as democratizing eyewear. For those of you who don't know them, they were founded in 1989. They do roughly 200 to 300 million dollars in turnover a year, so not the largest organization, but not a small organization either. And they very much talk about disrupting the optical sector. So there are three key pillars of their business model, which don't seem to be in my slides, so that's clearly been deleted. So I'll go through that very quickly. So there's a couple pillars which I'm going to recite from memory. Number one is a tech-enabled omni-channel experience in the physical world. It is really, really important to Own Days and to the C-suite that the digital experience is not separate from the physical, and this is embedded into the journey, and it's a key part of the physical store. The middle pillar, as I visualize the slide, is going after a different audience. So the target demographic for Own Days as an optical retailer is young, fashion-conscious audience. They specifically are looking to flip the way that we shop in the UK. I was about to ask how many people here are wearing glasses. There's actually not many of you in this particular audience. But we heard from Specsavers today, right? And I think most of us who have had that retail experience in the UK understand that you might own a pair of glasses, you might even own two, but you don't usually go too far beyond that, and it's an infrequent purchase. You might go once every couple of years. Own Days see glasses like you might see jewelry, or you might see a fashion accessory, and they believe that you should have multiple pairs. Brown pairs for brown suits. I don't own a brown suit. Pairs for driving, pairs for work. The idea is that you customize it, right? It's a fashion accessory. It's not necessarily a healthcare thing that is something that you have to wear. And then the final part of their journey, and the three pillars, is the speed and efficacy of the purchase journey. They have a very clear KPI. 20 minutes is the amount of time you'll be in their store from start to end. You'll have selected your frames, you'll have done your eye test, and you'll be out the door with a new pair of glasses. Again, very different to what we experience here in the UK, where it can take weeks sometimes to have those frames come back to you. So now the journey walkthrough. I'm going to walk you through very, very briefly kind of how they targeted me as an individual in that pre-purchase journey using digital channels, how they created a consistent experience through the store in Osaka, which is the one that I visited, and then finally how they flipped that business model on its head and what that means for a tech-enabled in-store experience and the lessons we can learn back here in the UK. So the pre-purchase journey, I talked a lot about that tech-enabled experience. I was an Own Days customer before I knew I was an Own Days customer, because I first learned about them from the comfort of my sofa in London, right? I was scrolling Instagram, and as those of you who use Instagram and TikTok know how powerful those For You algorithms are, I was being served so much content around restaurants to visit, temples to visit, cities to visit, and the next one in my reel was, not this exact one, but a piece of content from Own Days. Not a sponsored advert, to be clear, but a piece of content from a real person that said, you are coming to Japan, you have to visit Own Days. It's so different. They completely changed the business model on its head. And specifically, due to the current power of the British pound over the yen, your purchasing power is very, they didn't say it in exactly this way, by the way, but catering to an international audience, right? They knew I was going there, and it was a very specific way of targeting me. When I finally did make my way to Japan, they created that consistent experience. So signs outside, welcome to Japan, tour Japan using Own Days, right? Really making sure that that experience they served me digitally is replicated in the physical world. And then finally, and this, I found this super interesting. So stepping into their store, it was like stepping into like a Nike or an Adidas or a Gymshark, right? It was, music was playing, lots of digital screens with celebrities wearing various different frames, very modern displays. So very much aligning to that younger audience that they're looking to target. And then interestingly, they had a feature wall on the back. And I've got a small picture here in the bottom, and there were sponsored partnership type frames, but in their situation, it was around anime characters, right? So like popular anime characters, and people were going absolutely mad for this. It was a super popular part of the store. So understanding that there is the ability to tie into local cultures and specific social elements that those specific target demographics are after is really, really powerful and something that they understood. They talk about this idea of a global model, but a local culture and the efficacy of sale. So that brings us to the browsing journey. 4 minutes left. Cool, that's not a lot. Right, so I'll be very quick then. So seamless technology implementation. Almost every pair of frames in this store had a QR code sticker on the front. I'm sure lots of us have interacted with QR codes in the UK. They're a fantastic piece of technology. Sometimes they're broken. Sometimes they don't take you to that specific item. It's quite frustrating. I did a sort of sheep dip around 10 or so pairs. It worked every single time. When I scanned those QR codes, I'm wearing the pair today, if you can't tell by this. It took me to the specific frame on the website. I could add it to my basket. I could save it to my favorites, capitalizing on perhaps transient customers who cannot complete their journey right now, but have been inspired by a product as they come through the store. As I then moved to purchase those frames, there's a nice picture of my partner Ellie here with an iPad. We were given an iPad to book our eye test, right? Remember this 20-minute KPI as this is going through. And you were booking a slot, and you were also served a very quick questionnaire. What will you be wearing these glasses for? Is it for work? Is it for driving? How much screen time do you think you're going to be experiencing on these? And this was not just a data mining activity. This was to curate your glasses to your personal preferences. So I said, I'm going to wear them a lot for work. I'm probably going to have 12 plus hours of screen time in a day. And they said, well, you probably then, Charlie, want the blue light filter on these because it's going to be much better for your eyes. No additional cost to me, but a really good way of tapping into a personal experience and really sort of my personal preferences. You then moved upstairs, not a sort of clinical setting like we see in the UK. And what was really interesting like this, if you imagine self-checkout machines at a supermarket, more akin to that, you had customers who could self-serve their eye tests. That is not something we do here in the UK. In fact, as far as I'm aware, it's not allowed here in the UK because it's very much tied in as a healthcare service. But you popped your head into the machine. There was a little joystick. You could move images into or out of focus. When you were happy with your prescription, you click confirm, and a ticket popped out the side saying, Charlie, you're -4 in this eye, -3 in this eye. Eagle-eyed among you will see I do have an assistant. That is because I don't speak Japanese. So unfortunately, I couldn't complete that experience myself, but an understanding there that they might need to adapt their processes as well. Prescription comes out of the machine. You move to the spectacle assembling room, which is a dedicated part of the retail space, at which point they very quickly mocked up my frames. So these frames, these lenses, I was then encouraged to walk around the store, much like wearing a new pair of shoes, walk to the end, walk back, downstairs. They even told me I could leave the store if I wanted to. But really just sort of testing and confirming that product with me in real time. And so I think if we think about this as an experience, and it's not really something that we see here in the UK, that there's a lot that we can learn from this. Number one, how might the proliferation of a new business model disrupt not your industry, but your business specifically, right? So this model doesn't exist right now, but if a regulation changes, or if a law changes, or if a piece of policy comes into place that makes something like this possible in the UK, would you be able to adapt quickly enough to that gap in the market? Or could an international player with an established presence move very quickly and capitalize on that opportunity? Secondly, targeting a younger audience. How much of us are really, really doing this, right? They specifically do this at Own Days for that longevity of the business model and making sure that they are building a business that is remaining relevant and adapting to new trends and behaviors as they emerge. Tapping into tech. It's probably the best example I've seen, I would say, actually, of that proper integration of digital and physical, not just tech for tech's sake in the store, and not just a replication of the sort of physical experience online. Really true omni-channel enablement was aligning and landing very, very well with our target demographic. Increasing purchase frequency. This is more about, they flipped the business model on its head, right? So what I would encourage everyone in this room to think about is, don't get locked in traditional ways of thinking about your business. Things have always been done in this way, we've always shopped in this way, I always think about a brand in this way. That might not be the case forever, and some new native players can come along, change the way that people think about your brand or your service, and disrupt it overnight. Finally, or not finally, fifth, experience matters. Like I mentioned, that local appreciation, tapping into the anime characters. And another example of a company that does this well, also Japanese, is Uniqlo, right? So Uniqlo do really good local partnerships with bakeries and restaurants and things like this, where they get their prints on the t-shirts. And if we think about Leeds as a city, as an example, and the incredible cultural heritage of this, tapping into those communities, specifically within cities, is very, very powerful and something that we can all learn from. And finally, it was a modern retail experience. I'm a bit of a retail geek, so I'm not sure many people would say like shopping for glasses is fun, but this really was fun, and you could see it, right? The store was packed. It was packed with their specific target demographic, and they landed all of their key messages really, really well. I'm probably very over on time, so just to finish it off, yesterday I was attending the Future of Retail conference in London, and the former CEO and president of Walmart, she's retired now, but she was talking about their international expansion, and she said, look, it's so important to understand those local cultures and the nuances, but ultimately, no matter where you go, people are more the same than they are different. And there's always going to be a number of things that you must sort of align to and that will always be true. You have to deliver value. And what she meant by that is, what value are you providing to your customers? Why should they get out the house, spend their hard-earned cash with you? Why should they shop with you? Like, what value you're providing to them in the modern world where we have a huge amount of pressure on customer spend. So value has to stay at the center. Convenience. Ultimately, whether it be physical or digital, seamless, frictionless experiences are what we've all come to expect. So it's really, really important to make sure you're aligning to that expectation of the modern consumer. And then finally, personalization. This is ubiquitous probably to all of our sectors, our services, our companies. Customers expect personalization, and we expect it on a one-to-one basis. Whether or not that is sensible or allowed or possible right now is a different question. But you really need to think about the way that they used that iPad for me to understand me better in a moment where I was a captive audience within their store. Think about ways to interact with your customers, and how do you not just interact with them, but action that insight to create better offerings for them. So, did I then go really fast? Okay, cool, great. So that brings me to the end, at which point I think the question that I would like to pose to this audience is, what do you think is the biggest disruption or the biggest risk or the biggest threat to your organization at this point in time? What do you see, I suppose, coming down the road, and therefore, how are you as an organization reacting? Or if you're not reacting, what is stopping you from doing so? And I think that's the conversation I'd like you all to have in the drink session. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And I'll be around. So thank you.